You people should know your place. That was the first sentence that shattered the air. Loud, sharp, cruel, spoken by a white police sergeant with mirrored sunglasses and a badge that gleamed like it granted him divine judgment. It happened in front of 20 witnesses. Cameras were rolling. Children were watching. The you people he referred to. A quiet, elderly black man, Isaiah Franklin, dressed in a worn blue blazer with frayed cuffs, standing in the front row of a Veterans Memorial dedication ceremony. He wasn't disrupting anyone. He wasn't making a scene. He was simply present. And that, apparently, was enough to make him a target. Sergeant Clive Remington didn't ask for ID. He didn't ask a question. He just stormed up to Isaiah, chest puffed, voice carrying over the speaker system, and snapped, "You're not allowed up here. This area is for invited guests and speakers. You people always think you can just walk where you want." The microphone crackled with every word. No one interrupted. Isaiah's mouth opened slightly, as if to say something, but then he closed it. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just looked away. That's when Clive reached out and grabbed Isaiah's shoulder hard. Phones came up, cameras flashed, and still not a single official stepped in. The local mayor stood frozen. The governor's aide looked at the ground. The MC, a former TV anchor, tapped the mic nervously, but didn't stop the spectacle. "Do you have credentials, sir?" Clive snapped, lifting Isaiah's VA-issued cap and tossing it on the grass like it was trash. Isaiah didn't flinch. He just reached into his coat, slowly and methodically, and pulled out a laminated card. On it was a photo of a younger version of himself, strong, solemn-eyed, uniformed. It was his official Department of Defense veteran ID. Clive snatched it, scanned it, scoffed. "Sure, everyone's got one of these now. Doesn't mean you belong here." Then he handed it back like it was a receipt from a fast food order. By now, the crowd was murmuring. People shifted uncomfortably. Someone whispered, "Wait, isn't that the guy they named the base hall after?" But no one stepped forward. Clive turned to the crowd and said, loud enough for the mics to pick up, "Ceremony's over, folks. Move along. Let's not let one man's entitlement ruin a day of remembrance." And that's how Isaiah Franklin, 91 years old, retired Command Sergeant Major, recipient of 2 Bronze Stars and a Distinguished Service Cross, was escorted out of a ceremony meant to honor people exactly like him. The cameras caught every second. The internet caught fire hours later. But the damage? It had already been done. Isaiah went home that evening and didn't speak a word. He sat in his recliner, holding the folded program from the ceremony. He stared at it for hours. And then, quietly, he placed it in the fireplace and watched it burn. Isaiah Franklin didn't call a lawyer. He didn't post a video. He didn't say a word to the reporters who camped outside his modest one-story home the next morning. He just watered the garden, same as he did every morning. But the world? The world was already shifting beneath his quiet steps, because someone had stepped forward. Not at the ceremony, no, too much cowardice in suits that day. But later that evening, when the footage aired on 3 local news stations, someone had seen it. Someone who recognized Isaiah Franklin before the nameplate on the screen caught up. And that someone? General Raymond Decker, retired 4-star Medal of Honor recipient and Isaiah's former commanding officer. He was in D.C. when the video aired. By midnight, he was already on the phone. Not with Isaiah, but with the Pentagon. And then with the governor. And then, at 3:42 a.m., with Clive Remington's precinct captain, who woke to 5 missed calls and a nightmare. The storm was coming. By Friday morning, Clive was called into the chief's office. He strutted in like it was routine. "Look, I know there's some internet outrage," he said before anyone spoke, "but I was doing my job. We've got protocols." The chief didn't look at him, didn't speak, just pressed a button on the phone. A deep voice came through the speaker. "This is General Raymond Decker. Are you currently in the room, Sergeant Remington?" Clive blinked. Yes, sir?" "Good," Decker said. "Then I want you to hear me clearly. You put your hands on a man who outranks every person in your building, alive or dead. You laid hands on a national treasure, a soldier who pulled 3 men from a burning Humvee under RPG fire. A man who once radioed in a medevac with a collapsed lung and no functional arm. A man who saved my life in Sangin, and who, after retirement, donated 60% of his pension to scholarships for children of fallen soldiers. You shamed him in front of the flag he bled for. That's not protocol, Sergeant. That's disgrace." The line went dead. The chief exhaled slowly. "Turn in your badge. Now." Clive stared. "This is insane! You're going to throw me under the bus for some old guy?" The chief stood, walked around the desk, and for the first time, Clive noticed the plaque on the wall. "Command Sergeant Major Isaiah Franklin Hall, dedicated 2012. This office was named after him. "This isn't about politics or PR," the chief said. "This is about the one man every single one of us was supposed to protect, and you humiliated him." Clive didn't turn in his badge. They took it from him. Meanwhile, Isaiah still didn't speak. Not until Saturday morning. He sat on his porch, coffee in hand, when a black SUV pulled into his driveway. 2 men in dress blues stepped out, General Decker and Colonel Miriam Hoyt. They didn't ring the bell. They walked up slowly, stopped at the steps. Decker removed his hat. "Permission to approach, Sergeant Major?" Isaiah squinted at him over his mug, then nodded once. The general sat. The colonel remained at parade rest. "I failed you," Decker said after a long silence. "We all did." Isaiah didn't reply. "I can't undo what happened, but I can make sure the world knows who you are." Still, Isaiah didn't speak. Decker pulled something from his coat, a photograph, creased and yellowing. A younger Isaiah standing beside a mangled vehicle, smoke behind him, holding a radio to his chest with blood on his sleeve. "This picture sits in a frame on my desk," Decker said. It's been there for 28 years. You saved me that day, and it's long past time we told that story out loud." Isaiah finally looked at him and nodded. 2 days later, a press conference was held on the steps of the state capitol. Isaiah stood silently beside General Decker and Governor Lindstrom as the world was introduced, truly, for the first time, to the man they had tried to erase. They read aloud from citations. They showed battlefield photos. They shared stories that had never been told outside classified reports. And then Governor Lindstrom did something unprecedented. From this day forward, the Veterans Memorial Plaza shall be renamed the Isaiah Franklin National Monument. The crowd erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. But Isaiah just nodded politely. No grandstanding, no vengeance in his eyes, just quiet dignity. But the moment wasn't over, because that evening, as the sun dipped behind the monument now bearing his name, Isaiah returned. Not for the cameras, but for someone else. It was nearly dusk when Isaiah Franklin returned to the monument now bearing his name. No reporters, no speeches, no medals. Just him and Thor. Not his Thor, no. The original Thor had passed years ago. But this dog, a younger German shepherd trained by the same program, carried on the same spirit. At 6:42 p.m., Isaiah wheeled himself down the marble path lined with flags, the plaza quiet except for the rustling of leaves and the distant hum of the city. When he reached the center, a granite column etched with his name and service, he stopped. His hand brushed the stone. Then he leaned forward, pulled something from his coat pocket. A letter. It was old, yellowed, folded neatly. He placed it at the base of the monument and sat back. "You told me no one would remember, Ed," he said softly. "Told me all this country ever does is use you up and move on. And most days I believed you." Thor sat beside him, ears alert, tail still. But not today. He tilted his head toward the sky, where the last rays of sunlight turned the edges of the flags golden. Today they remembered. The letter, addressed to PFC Edward Boone, KIA 1993, had never been mailed. Isaiah had carried it in his wallet for 30 years. It simply said, "You didn't die forgotten. I remember. And when it's my time, they'll remember you too." Now, finally, they did. That week, stories of Isaiah Franklin spread across the country. Not because of a PR campaign, not because of a viral outrage, but because people, ordinary people, began to talk. Teachers taught about him in classrooms. Families visited the monument. Veterans, long silent, wrote letters to newspapers recounting missions where Isaiah had saved their lives but refused credit. And in neighborhoods like the one he'd lived in for 20 years, people began to knock on doors, not to accuse or judge, but to ask questions, to listen, to learn. Melanie Tran, a high school student from 2 blocks over, wrote in her college essay, "We all walked past him, every day, until someone put a camera on, and we finally saw. I won't make that mistake again." 1 week later, during a Sunday morning service at Trinity Baptist Church, Isaiah entered the sanctuary. The congregation paused, then stood, not because he was famous, but because he was finally seen. The pastor stepped down from the pulpit. "Welcome home, Sergeant Major," he said. Isaiah nodded, sat quietly. But there was something different about him, not in his face or his voice, but in the way he held his head, as if the weight he'd carried for decades had finally been lifted. That night, Isaiah sat on his porch again, watching the stars, Thor at his feet. A knock came at the door. It was a boy, no older than 10, with a backpack and nervous eyes. He held up a school report. "It's about you," the boy said. "My teacher said we had to write about someone who changed history." Isaiah raised an eyebrow. "History?" The boy nodded. "I wrote about how you saved people even when nobody noticed. I want to be like that." Isaiah didn't smile right away. He looked at the boy, then at the porch light above, then back at the boy. "You already are," he said, motioning for him to sit. The boy did. They talked for an hour. No cameras, no applause, just a veteran and the next generation. Because that's the thing about legacy. You can't silence it. You can't shame it. You can't strip it away. They tried to erase Isaiah Franklin, but in doing so, they made sure the world would never forget him. Not because he fought back, but because he stood tall, quiet, steady, unmoved.